welcome to EMD Media's weekly show, the H panel. The H panel starts now, and we'll be talking about dissecting Ethiopia's new transitional justice mechanism. And I'm joined by
It looks like we lost Getachew.
Oh no, he's the important one.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
I think I removed myself, I guess. I can't blame anybody. So we'll start with the usual segment. What was the highlight for each of the panelists over the past 7 days? The topic today is dissecting Ethiopia's new transitional justice mechanism. We are live online. We'll be also broadcasting this content on HBS, that is the Horn Broadcasting Services, that broadcasts on satellite to the Horn of Africa under YSAT. Welcome, Duke, Faisal, and Solomon. It's a great pleasure to have you as always. And we'll start what was the highlight for each one of you. Duke, you want to start with that?
Sure. The highlight for me, of course, I follow the humanitarian situation pretty closely in Tigray. The highlight was that it was the second week of pretty good food distribution from half of the humanitarian response. The JEOP takes the areas of the eastern zone, the central zone, the southeastern zone, and half of the southern zone. They were able to get about 500,000 rations delivered in the past 2 weeks, both weeks, meaning that they've been able to keep this pretty amazing pace. The problem is that the World Food Program, their response has almost completely collapsed, at least just in the past month. In February, they were able to deliver around 50,000 food rations, and their caseload includes 2.1 million people who very urgently need food. Now, we don't have good hard numbers on how many people in the Northwest Zone or how many people in Tigray, more broadly, are displaced. But we know a significant number of the people that the World Food Program is supposed to be delivering food to, they don't have access to their land. They don't have access to their livestock or their crops. They're in displacement camps that, from the last we were able to see, were horrible, horrible conditions. Now, the last glimpse we really had of that was about 1.5 years ago. So we don't know how bad they are now. The UNHCR put up a document on their website last week that gave a glimpse of what people were going through. These are people who returned, who were in displacement camps in the capital in Adgarat and returned. Now, in both of those places, they weren't getting enough aid to stay in the displacement camps. They had to return. They didn't return because things were better. I mean, that I'm sure factored into it, but they said that they returned because they were not getting aid. So they weren't actually returning. They were displaced from the displacement facility. And the conditions that they found on the ground when they got back were terrible. And they had focus group discussions, an actual research methodology that honored the fact that we're talking about human beings and they have real needs, and these needs need to be met. That document got released. It got picked up. I did a thread on it. It got picked up by Dr. Tedros. Other people, presented the document, and then they took it down, which is very, very troubling, because there should be by now some idea of where the IDPs are in Tigray, what condition they're in, what their needs are, how they are surviving. That has none of that information has been released. All we know is that food is not getting to them. Medicine is not getting to them. They're not getting enough aid to stay in the areas where they're displaced. Now they're returning to where their homes used to be in many cases, but what they're finding is that they've been destroyed. Their farm equipment's gone, their food stocks are gone. their seed is gone for planting for next year, right? For next month, probably for this year, is gone. And so they need food immediately. They need humanitarian assistance immediately, and they need that to continue until they can have a harvest where they can have their own, where they can grow their own food, where they can harvest their own food. But it's not happening right now. So it's very troubling. There was a really great effort by the JEOP to get food out to a lot of people, but again, it's always going to be this a victory on one hand, but then a complete failure on the other hand of getting it to people in the Northwest Zone and other places that desperately need it. So that's pretty much what I've been covering the past week.
Great, thank you, Duke. I don't know if it was only for me. I was asking our viewers as well if there was any audio issue, because I was hearing some echo from your side.
Oh no.
Okay, so maybe when you come next round, hopefully it will get better. Faisal, again, the same question. What was the highlight for you over the past week?
Yeah, I think what stood out for me this week is the increasing tension between the Somali region, both as a civilian population as well as it is government and political groups and civic groups vis-a-vis the administration of Shimelis Abdissa. This tension revolves around what Somalis call land grab by Shimelis Abdissa and his administration. Basically, as you have seen with the Guji and the Sidama, there is also the same contention that exists in the Somali region vis-a-vis Oromia. In the last reiteration of or reorganization of the Oromo administrative system, Somalis are claiming, or at least accusing, Shimelis Abdissa as grabbing land. And this press release was issued by the Congress for Somali Cause, which is now one of the most really upcoming social and political groups within the Somali scene. And basically, this press release, which condemns what they call Mr. Abdissa's land grab and his policy, not only touches that land grab in terms of a new district that Mr. Abdissa created within the Somali region, but also, as we covered earlier, willy-nilly, he's just walking into the Somali region and putting projects. One of the major projects that he put there, which the press release also covers, is a $400 million Bir Dam that he is putting only 10 kilometers away from Jijiga. And the impact assessment of that project is very, very taxing against the Somalis. Number one, about 35,000 Somalis farmers would be displaced without any compensation from their own farming and land. Number two, this will suffocate and choke up Jijiga's water supply system, that project. And number three, the water catching of that area will also catch 80% of what gives water to eastern portions of the Somali region, meaning east of Jijiga. Basically, the main river that goes through this region is called Jarar River, and with this catchment, basically 80% of that river will dry up. In which case, many cities, all the way down to Kabri Dahar and Daghabur and other towns, will have some serious impact. That being the social impact and environmental impact, in addition to the fact that if the dam gives away, Jijiga could be washed out because it's only 10 kilometers. This project also violates what I was told to be a law that exists within the federal system that says another state cannot put a project within 60 kilometers or miles, depending on, from another administrative capital or center, in which case this project violates that 60 kilometer from Jijiga, because Jijiga is the Somali administrative seat. So basically, this press release was really eye-opening for most Somalis, because it also accuses as if though Shimelis Abdissa's administration is inching towards the border of Somalia. Now, this new village, it's a village called Makanisa. A village is now converted by Shimali Sabtiza into a district. According to the Ethiopian constitution, a district needs to have some attributes geographically, population-wise, economically. One village is now being converted, and that village is closer to the border of Somalia, Togwajale. So they are accusing Shimali Sabdisa of moving closer and closer and closer, as if though he's a different country, into the borders of Somalia, as if though Jijiga and the Somali region cannot represent Ethiopia's interests towards the border. And they have been doing a lot of, Shimali Sabtisa has been doing a lot of activities that indicates that he doesn't trust the Somali region as representing Ethiopia's interests. Having said that, there are also other issues in the Negele Moyale area, where, as you have heard about the Guji, Somalis have also lost districts, which Shimali Sabtisa also grabbed from that area. So it's not only this area in Makanisa, but also over there. As in my own writings in the last 30 years, this is not new thing to me. There was an article I wrote in 2004 when the so-called Ethiopian plebiscite was conducted in the region. Somalis at that time were also robbed. That's when Jijiga became the boundary between Somalis and Oromo administrative. So the OBDO did the same thing that Shimalis Abdisa's PP is doing to the Somalis, literally daylight robbing, where the Somalis can no longer do anything. So this article that I wrote in 2004, basically not knowing what will come today, but somehow I had the hunch to say that you haven't seen nothing yet. And basically the resizing of the Somali geography. If you go back to the charter map, which came as a result of the 1991, conference, Somalis lost close to 400 districts between the 1999-91 map and today. And basically that's really rubbing a sore point on the Somalis. And the language often used by the administration in Oromia against Somalis whenever they challenge this is to label them as terrorists, as foreigners, as people serving foreign interests. So unfortunately, Lama Magarsa was known to call Somalis al-Shabaab for any reason at any given time. The literature will show you that. And now Abdisa and his team are terrorizing Somalis by calling them names so that they can disarm them and literally rob them. That's what people are arguing. We're expecting a new press release from other groups, including Ogaden National Liberation Front, and that will take the issue at a higher level. Thank you.
Thank you, Faisal, for that. Dr. Solomon, you and me were supposed to do something this week, but we couldn't make it because you were traveling as well. What highlights do you have for us? There is a lot happening between Magala, this within Magala, and so on. So I'm just curious, what do you have to share with us?
Like you said, thank you for having us again. Number of developments. I think we probably would address them at some point as they are big issues, major issues. But something I cannot pass without commenting on. Number one, despite the procrastination on humanitarian assistance, which took well elaborated, despite lack of access, again, to adequate cash reserves and access to savings in the bank, despite no salary and pension to federal employees, state employees. The people of Tigray are showing their resilience and trying to start a sense of normalcy by paying heavy commission and fee to get commodities from the rest of the world, including from Addis Ababa and from other regions. So that's a positive note. On the negative note, it continues to frustrate on humanitarian assistance delivery. And again, pensioners have not been able to get their money. This is almost 2 years going now. State employees, federal employees going 3 years, they haven't got any money. So that's the tragic part. Other developments, major development, is the establishment of the cabinet, transitional administration in Tigray, which has a lot of theatrics, drama, and mechanication by Abiy. What we have heard today has not been confirmed yet. He may want some changes or may not accept the whole thing what has been done so far. So more drama, more theatrics we're gonna see. Another disappointment from the US government, a recent award they give to Azam Mohammed, who have been ginning up hatred, seriously ginning up hatred over the last 2 years, to recognize and award her for good journalism, for empowerment of women, and human rights protection. That's a big disappointment that they are not doing their homework. That unless they intentionally want to reward behavior like this, it's very disappointing. The last one is, I think, our topic today, the drama around transitional justice, which is unfolding. I think we will go ahead on into that. Thank you.
Thank you for highlighting that. Let's start with the topic. So the topic is Ethiopia's new transitional justice mechanism. Let's dissect that. Among other things, what's happening is this document came in January as a draft. So it's dated January 2023. And the stakeholder consultation started this week on Monday, I guess. And based on the report, which was attended, the first consultation attended by the Deputy Prime Minister, they will be holding this kind of consultation in 59 different places. So the question that comes to mind is, what is this? And how is it different or similar to the investigations that has been done by the joint team by the UN and the Ethiopian Humanitarian Human Rights Commission, and also what the International Humanitarian Human Rights Experts Commission on Ethiopia is doing? As we know, and we have covered it in the past as well, Ethiopia has tried at least twice to defund this initiative from the UN, and it also opposed its establishment. And we also know that the Deputy Prime Minister is leading an effort to have this tabled on the African Union Summit in June, and thereafter take it as an African Union agenda to the UN Security Council. So Faisal, I just want you to start helping our viewers on what is in this transitional justice mechanism that Ethiopia is pushing for. And one of the questions that people are asking specifically from Tigray is, as the saying goes, if you want to hide a tree, plant it in a forest. So is this about hiding the big trees that had happened over the past 2 years in the forest of transitional justice? Faisal.
Yeah. Yeah. So I, as you said, I read the report, and definitely this is quite different from what the United Nations is transitional justice team would want to see. I think that group is transitional justice search is limited to mainly the atrocities and crimes of against humanity, and if you will, if genocide was mainly limited to Tigray, northern Ethiopia, and probably some parts of Oromia, I don't know, but mainly Tigray. The 1 million people who perished, and the um, the um, the role that the Ethiopian government played and other armed groups. This one is completely different. This one, as you said, Getachew, is one that is initiated and sponsored and carried out by the very Ethiopian government. So at the outset, you know, they mention a lot of other studies, such as the Colombian transitional justice, which is very interesting because the High Commissioner for Human Rights in the Colombian case says this, and I really like to quote. That report says, without truth, reconciliation is not possible. Without reconciliation, the risk of repetition is real. So with that, are we already, if we cannot find the truth from the very perpetrators, are we already on the course to repeat the same mistake like we did in the past? So let me first really, after I read the report, congratulate what I think were consultants or a consultant team that put this thing together, because it doesn't carry any name. It doesn't even sign to the Ethiopian government. It just is blank. But I just assume that it was done by a team of consultants from the government and from people who were retained by the government. It's really a cut and paste report, although it peppers the report with some relevant information that pertains to Ethiopia. And and basically the three big headings that it touches: the history of transitional justice and the need for that in Ethiopia, the policy alternatives for transitional justice in Ethiopia, and options for transitional justice to create institutional arrangements to address this. Those are the three big headings that the report carries. I think, Kitacho, you probably touched the first portion of this, the history and the framework and the concept of this report. SAIL is it or seeks some sort of credence from the AU and from the United Nations if possible, but mainly from the AU. And in the northern Ethiopia's war, the AU did not really play a very positive role. It watched this conflict to rage for 2 years and the death of 1 million people. So if they really say that they will work within the framework of AU's transitional justice, which I understand is a very rudimentary, then that opens the entire concept and this whole endeavor to sort of criticism. Uh, the most interesting portion, and I think we'll be discussing this as we go. The most interesting portion of the report is how they translate and address the issue of transitional justice. It's mainly to see if they can identify who committed what at an individual level and see what can be done to that. Basically, it's based on a Western concept where it says if you are an individual and you committed a crime, you will be held responsible and then that person will be dealt. It's a very, very narrow scope. I checked with other forms of justice, such as restorative justice and transformative justice, and those addressing justices look at the holistic picture of what went wrong in this country. Is it social? Is it political? Is it cultural? Is it ethnic? Because what was happening in Tigray was heavy political. So if you just make this as an individual crime and really detach that from the political aspect of it, you can really get a lot out of that. If you detach what had happened in the Somali case from the neo-colonial kind of thing that Ethiopia carried for the years, where 1.5 million people were uprooted intentionally during the Derg, then you cannot really address social justice in that. So with those limitations, you get very disappointed at two levels. Number one, it looks like it has been already came suggested, or they came to a conclusion that the evaluation and the process of transitional justice in the Ethiopian context will start probably from 1991. It's an intentional way to get some of the EPRDF and probably some of the current people. Completely ignore the two most harsh people in the Ethiopian history, which is the Derg era, where students were killed and families paid for the bullet that killed the students. Not to mention the Tigray, the Eritrean, the Somali, and the whole movement is such as EPRP and what completely intentional it seems to be, that will be ignored. The other thing will be ignored is people who have been massacred because of who they are, whether it is the current one in the 2018, which could be probably addressed in a limited way, but the ones that preceded will be ignored. The 1977, Jijiga, as you know, close to 20 elders, the who is who of that community were slaughtered. So I think the more I read this, the more I realized what they call the temporal structure, the time where they will stop at, evaluating, has a highly politicized concept, and it will not go deep into what went Ethiopia. The social fabric of Ethiopia will not be questioned. The political structure of Ethiopia will not be questioned. The cultural aspect of Ethiopia, which has some sort of hegemonic culture, will not be questioned. So basically, you get disappointed with the report when they're evaluating each period, the way they casually just do a typical consultant's approach to say risk and strengths. They will pick one timeline and they will say, here is the strengths and here is the risks, and basically pass that and come to the conclusion that probably history is not important, political entanglement of the past is not important, and basically my expectation of this study is that it will come down on 1991 harsh, and then probably be easy on 2018 and beyond, because they will probably say that was a war, huge war that cannot be, detailed, because the report always talks how challenging it is if you go back to the past, because too much detail is lost, too much data may not be available. So with the current, they probably would say that the 1 million death was all over the country. It was in the northern part of Ethiopia, but and then just try to arrest. Just in conclusion, I think I think whatever comes out of this will not reconcile Ethiopia. Number one, the drivers are the very ones whom you would have questioned, whether it is the deputy prime minister or the regional presidents who at the local level themselves committed crimes, as I was talking about Mr. Abdisa's situation, where current crimes are being committed in Sidama, in the Somali region, and many others, or in the Afar and Somali region. That's number one. Number two, I think the Tigray massive crime will also be whitewashed under the rubric of information not being distilled and not available. So I'm a bit disappointed. I think some attempt has been made. I think the 52 town halls and town meetings that you have mentioned will be controlled by the regional government, as we have seen during the PP's constitutional process and during the election, where, as I attested here, that the people who were coming from the Somali region were known in February, although the election took place sometime in October. I think the same thing would happen now, that these guys would be given a mandate to just run through the process quickly, pick up the people that they want, control the town halls, and then bring that back to Addis Ababa to just go ahead and report back.
Thank you, Faisal, for that. Solomon, before you go, I just want to play on the point of the leadership that is accused of and has all their hand in this genocidal war, leading and having this mechanism is, I think, something that many people are being hurt, to hear. Let's hear what Pekka Havisto, who was the higher envoy for the European Union to the Horn of Africa, spoke about the leadership, what they told him when he met them in February 2021. And I will also follow that with Senator Menendez, what he said to NPR on November 19, 2021, as well on the same account.
Particularly the news of the violence against the women is incredible and something that probably not has happened in any wars or conflict in that region. Maybe a word about what is the aim of Ethiopia when I met the Ethiopian leaders in February, they really used this kind of language that they are going to destroy the Tigrayans, they are going to wipe out the Tigrayans for 100 years and so forth, which for me referred to very serious human rights atrocities and crimes as well. If you wipe out your national minority, what is it? You cannot destroy all the people, you cannot destroy all the population in Tigray, and I think that's very obvious that we have to react, and because it looks for us like ethnic cleansing. It is a very, very serious act if this is true.
This was Pekka Haavisto, who is a Finnish foreign minister. At that time, he was the envoy of the European Union to the Horn of Africa. And the senator, who is the chair of the Foreign Committee in the Senate, said this to NPR at that time.
What's going on, a genocide. Senator, you're the chairman of the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee. You know words matter. Do you believe a genocide is underway in the region?
Yes, and I have said so. And as we see a genocide unfolding, we need to do everything we can to stop it, and we need to call it as such. If the phrase that we use, never again, is to have any meaning, when a genocide is being committed, it needs to be recognized as such in the moment, not for history, in the moment, and then there need to be actions that seek to stop the genocide from continuing.
So, Saul, my question to you is, do you see all this being lost in this new forest of transitional justice, which seems to be supported by the UN and by the European Union and so on, yet another mechanism put forward by Ethiopia? And you can also comment on the fact that the TPLF that signed the Pretoria Agreement, in its dealing with Addis Ababa, might push and might subscribe to this notion of transitional justice that would hide all these crimes.
Sure. So I think Faisal elaborated substantively on this issue and the prospect of what would come out of this. Let's look at the framework first. Transitional justice. What is transitional justice? It's not an entirely legal process. It's to substitute what you cannot address through a legal recourse, through legal instruments. It's not an entirely political process that through elections and other mechanisms you would have political settlement. It tries to address both these issues, political and legal instrument, through a mechanism that both parties to this, or all parties to this, would gain something out of it and move forward. That's what transitional justice is about. What we will find through this discussion and through time, the transitional justice proposed now in Addis Ababa has nothing to do with justice, has to do a lot with politics and theatrics. And one thing correct about this transitional justice is transient. It is transient. It has nothing to do with looking at foundational, fundamental, and institutional resolutions and closure to the problems simmering within Ethiopia. This is simply transient, a facade. Another version of Madammer 2. This is version 2 of Madammer. There are three typical models of transitional justice where it's employed to some extent successfully. So the first case is you have the type of long-term grievances, which Faisal was trying to address, as way back as anyone can bring them forward. They could be 2-3 generations even further. Slavery, colonialism, Native Americans. So these are either through restorative, transformative, but transitional systems outside the judicial system, or in addition, in complementary to judicial and political instruments that you find resolution to. That the grievances, injury that came along from generations would find some kind of closure and resolution by admittance and acceptance and recognition and redress of the current regime, the current political system. That's not the case, what we see here in Addis. The other way of addressing is when you have a victor, a victim becomes a victor and wants to stop a cycle of violence. For instance, the Rwanda case. In the Rwanda case, the Tutsis were slaughtered, but their political and armed struggle got them over this issue, became the state, controlled the state power, and somehow tried a mechanism of transitional justice to stop violence. Whether they were successful or not, that's another thing, but that's one. That's not what we see. The victims in Ethiopia's case, if they seek transitional justice, that would have been 1991. That's not what's happening in 2023 now. The victor is dictating the terms of this transitional justice. So it doesn't fit that model. The other model is where you have intractable political situation, a conflict that is looking to spiral down, like where you have in Kenya, that finally looked into transitional justice and resolved political differences, community violence. This is not what's happening. The OLF, the TDF, other institutions from Somali opposition are not participating in this. They are not part of it. It doesn't fit this model either. So what's happening now is for the Abiy administration to escape the pressure of the International Commission of Experts on Human Rights Investigation and other demands, to circumvent that, they cooked up with this idea that they can have full control. In the international community, some members of the European, UK and others, in the United States, wanted to wash their hands and are supporting this. But this is not the first time. So if you look at the last 30 years, the PRDF has done it in one way or another form. When there were serious violences of politics and during elections particularly, one excuse that was provided was the law enforcement agents were not aware of human rights, they don't have the capacity, they don't have the resources. So that excuse was used during the 2000 election for the violence. Meles used it successfully. The European, particularly the United States, gave all the support to law enforcement agencies, including the judicial system. Does that stop human rights violation? Did it get any less? It actually got much worse because there is no political will. There was never a political will to look at judicial transformation. If you look into the document, page 13, it says page 13, but through the pages, I think it's page 14 or 14, like they say, the details, the devil is in the details. So it says, initials, who leads the investigation? So this is what they say. It's so funny. A highly pertinent issue in criminal accountability process pursued within the framework of transitional justice pertains to the question of who leads the critical activities. The police and security apparatus prosecution institutions and courts of law that had been operational at the time of the commission of the crimes cannot be allowed to remain central pillars of the traditional justice process. And then they try to modify without undertaking an actual or perceived institutional reform. Here is what they are playing. And if you go down a little bit, and you're going to find, which is very funny, if you can scroll down a little bit, yes, that one, you can stop there. Ethiopia is not a state party to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. Moreover, other options availed by the international system are neither desirable or nor feasible. Why wouldn't? Why are not they desirable? Why wouldn't this be feasible? It doesn't, because Ethiopia is not a party to the Rome Statute, doesn't preclude from implementing it the intent and instruments of the Rome Statute. If there is a political will, if there is a desire to do so. But that's not the desire, that's not the intent. This is simply a whitewash. This is simply to relieve the pressure of demands from taxpayers and human rights organizations and advocates in Europe and the United States, so that bilateral and multilateral loans and grants would start flowing. This is just a valve, a relief valve that they came up with. As we go along, not only in this document, but in the process, and during implementation, we will see this was like another Medemmer 2. This was another commitment by EPRDF and Ethiopian governments that one of the issues that they want to address was corruption, systemic corruption, and they got a lot of training, including the people you see attending in this conference who got their master's, PhDs, seminars, certificates in tackling corruption, in making changes, institutional reforms. Some of them not only experts, but heads of these institutions participating in the conference. Did they make a dent in tackling corruption? Corruption is at the worst level in Ethiopia currently. The very institutions these people lead. This is just Medemmer version 2. Yes, it is transient, not transitional justice.
Okay, thank you, Solomon, for that. Duke, I just want to play what last year, October, as we now the Humanitarian, the Human Rights Council, the UN, they have the assembly, and a similar gathering last year in October, the delegation from the European Union had to say this. I just want to open that for you, and I want you to comment on how the international community is, again, seeing this as another opportunity.
Our first priority should therefore be an immediate cessation of hostilities, direct talks in view of reaching a permanent ceasefire and a political solution to the conflict, and full humanitarian access to all conflict-affected areas. We welcome yesterday's announcement by the chairperson of the African Union Commission that the EU-led Mr. President, I have the honor to present on behalf of the European Union draft resolution L19 entitled Situation of Human Rights in Ethiopia. Almost 2 years into the conflict, the situation in northern Ethiopia remains alarming. Fighting resumed on the 24th of August, ending a 5-month truce. Our first priority should therefore be an immediate cessation of hostilities, direct talks in view of reaching a permanent ceasefire and a political solution to the conflict, and full humanitarian access to all conflict-affected areas. We welcome yesterday's announcement by the chairperson of the African Union Commission that the EU-led peace talks are due to start soon in South Africa. This is of the utmost urgency, given that with every day that goes by, there are more victims and there is more trauma. Meanwhile, much to our concern,
we continue to receive supports of grave human rights violations and abuses, reports of grave human rights violations and abuses, such as large-scale willful killings of civilians because of their ethnicity and widespread sexual and gender-based violence. The conclusions of the report by the International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia are very much in line with those of the Joint Investigative Team. There are reasonable grounds to believe that war crimes and crimes against humanity have been and continue to be committed. The EU is appalled by the gravity and scale of the human rights violations and abuses. We furthermore fear that this is the only tip of the iceberg. Tigray has been cut off from the outside world for months now.
Duke, the reason I'm playing this one is in addition to the crimes he's listing and mentioning that this is a tip of the iceberg, he mentions a couple of initiatives, international and a joint one. And the other one, in the document itself, it talks about its own domestic initiative, Ethiopia's Commission of Reconciliation. And the introduction is actually the document lists why it failed after 3 years existence. So my question to you for your reflection is, why should the European Union or international community yet again expect this maybe fourth, fifth initiative would work this time?
Well, they shouldn't. I mean, there's a very fundamental problem with it that everybody's brought up so far, I think. It's that the defendant is the judge. The defendant is the one setting up the commission. The defendant is the one. There's 2.9.2, the role of subnational administrations. It lays it out. The federal government's the most appropriate tier to initiate, coordinate, and lead the process. They're not. They're part of the problem. The question in my mind is whether these international actors who have all step up and denounce human rights violations when they happen in Ethiopia or anywhere. They say that, you know, these are never acceptable under any circumstances. I watched when the Ethiopia Commission came to present their report, and everybody had a turn saying that these were very bad things that have happened without actually pointing a finger at anybody, even though they laid it out in the report who was responsible for what. It's whether or not they want to rehabilitate this administration badly enough to pretend that this is something to do with transitional justice. It's a very dangerous game because, I mean, you can imagine how happy Assad would be to find out that this is transitional justice. So this is what that looks like. You can imagine any regime in the world that has abused their own civilians, that has you know, crushed the civil rights, the human rights of their own people, how happy they would be to set up a commission to exonerate themselves. Unless if the international community also wants to see the ruling party exonerated, they will back this, sadly. If they want to see justice for the people of Ethiopia, justice for the people of Tigray, for the people who have had their human rights abused, for people who have been killed, for people who have been subjected to horrible sexual abuse, not just for the people that's happened to already, but for the people that could happen to in the future. They will reject this sort of farce. It seems clearly designed to take the heat off of them, to take control of the narrative, to take control of the justice mechanism, to make sure that it's controllable, that it will not blow up in their face. That's what they're afraid of, I think. The Prosperity Party is that any sort of justice is going to put them in a bad situation, because there has been, these aren't just crimes that have been committed. They aren't just like, you know, when we're talking about prosecuting individuals, these aren't just individuals going out and doing things. These are policies that have been taken by the Ethiopian government to starve the people of Tigray, which we see is being used also in Oromia now. You know, some of these same, you know, just this warfare by deprivation. These are policies. There's no smoking gun. it's the Ethiopian regime that's committed these. And that's what has been brought up by the Etri Commission. That's what they very much aren't happy with, is that these are the perpetrators. So to have them set up a transitional justice, they talk about, when is it going to start? 1991, 1995, 2018. I think it should stop at 2018 because there's a complete conflict of interest beyond 2018 for a commission that's set up by the regime to actually prosecute the regime's behavior when it comes to human rights. We're going to find out if the international community really is committed to rehabilitating the ruling party of Ethiopia at any cost. This is going to be how they do it. They're going to, sell out any idea of universal human rights that can be accessible for the people of Tigray, for the people of Oromia. They're going to shuttle all of that just to rehabilitate the regime that's currently in power. And I think that would be a very bad move.
Thank you, Duke, for that. We still have some issues with your audio, but I hope our viewers heard you clearly. Faisal, you have been always clear about what to expect and not to expect from the US and countries like that, or the politicians. So Blinken is scheduled to travel to Addis, I think, on Tuesday, March the 14th. And here is the State Department saying on the March 10th press statement, where they say he will discuss implementation of the cessation of hostilities agreement to advance peace and promote transitional justice in northern Ethiopia. And this is the same Blinken. Again, I think we have covered it before, as reported by the CNN. He said March last year, this is act of cleansing, ethnic cleansing committed in Western Tigray. This was from March 10. Actually, it happened to be just a year, 2 years after that press release. I mean, before the press release was done. So the question is again, what should we expect in terms of the European Union, the US, in delivering in transitional justice as defined in that draft document? Many are saying we shouldn't expect anything to change from that draft, even after 60 consultations that are coming up. I think you mentioned that as well. So Faisal, you are, I can't hear you. You are not muted, but we can't hear you. Is it only for me?
No, I can't hear him either.
Yeah, I think Faisal, you are out and something happened to your audio. So it would be great if you can try again. No, we can't hear you. You are not muted, but we can't hear you. It's a mic problem, I guess.
I can chime in.
Yes, please.
Until he joins.
Yeah.
So I think Faisal will speak to that topic, but of course, as we have seen the pattern, it's not going to matter much except for the regime. But I think before I address that, I want to mention a few points why this drama is being ginned up. Just to remove the pressure in the pressure valve.
Can you hear me now?
Is he
Yes,
back?
Let Solomon finish his, and you'll be back. We can hear you. Okay, go ahead, Solomon.
So, and then to draw the attention from the pressure that people will be bogged down for a year or two or more on this transitional system, procedure, framework, shortcomings, capacity, resources needed for this. So they will be completely bogged down and set aside the actual justice, the seeking justice and ensuring justice. But will achieve neither, will not achieve justice, may give a temporary respite to the regime But reforming Abiy is beyond the pale. That train has left. When you have a fascist who is completely sunk in blood baths, you can't reform that. Every week, he's coming up with something that will bring conflict with a certain population, demographic, or political force. So he will continue to go into a deep, for lack of better term, into deep shade. So no matter what they try, it's not a regime they can reform or recover. It's beyond recover now. They may give him a temporary respite. That's all they can do. So it's unfortunate this will happen. There are at least actually 6 cases we can identify with the current effort. That is a futile exercise. Number one, this is being framed by the perpetrator. Number two, the demand is not coming from the public. And you don't see any sense of regret, contrition, apology, or efforts to mitigate. For instance, either to Oromia or to Tigray, relieving the pressure on the community. To Guji, you don't see that in public instruments. It's very hostile, still very oppressive. The primary audience, if you remember in Madammar, the primary audience was the domestic constituent. This one, the primary constituent is the international community, the US and Europe. It has nothing to do with the domestic audience. That's why it's not involving the domestic audience. It's not coming from those. It's coming from the region itself. If we see the political component of this, you would have seen the involvement of political forces, the OLF, from Tigray, and others in setting the terms of this transitional justice, but you don't. So I can go on, but I think I want to give a chance to Faisal. I don't want to take more time.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Faisal, I think we can hear you now.
Yeah, no, I think one thing that Americans are good at are 2 things. One, to be on the 2 opposite poles. Senator Menendez, whom I think to be, if not him, but has families who survived the Holocaust, is somebody who has no ifs or buts about what crimes are, and he will come straight forward and tell you there has been a genocide. With Blinken, who is a politician, he will take the other side and play with words. Then the other thing that, so they have this disparity. You will find that in American politicians always the 2 poles of the end. Then you have, again, the behavior of American politicians is to walk back on what they said before, because, their political, judgment is colored by the political situation that they face at the time. Now they are in the process of rehabilitation of Prime Minister Abiy, so they will do anything to make sure that they use their good offices to do so. So I with Blinken now, playing with words and concepts, it's within that, frame. I think this reconciliation and, if you will, transitional justice, in my opinion, could even hurt Ethiopia more. First of all, the report that has been presented admits that previous transitional justices, although done in a limited way, always had a flaw in terms of process. And who does it, who determines, who participates, who prepares, who goes after criminals, what have you. And knowing that they are still doing the same thing. They know when Demeke Mukonnen is standing there, he knows in a normal circumstance he would have been the one who would be, judged, but now he is the judge himself. I think what's unique with Ethiopia
I think we lost him again.
We lost you again, Faisal.
This is a Nuremberg scale.
We lost your audio again, unfortunately. You are making a good point.
I think he was back.
Can you try again now? Can you speak?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
we can hear you.
Okay. So I think when you look at the scale of mayhem and crimes that happened in the span of 2 years, this is something that goes beyond the transitional justice, the way it has been now built to us. It should have been in Nuremberg style. Who kills 2 million people, plus the others that have not been accounted in Oromia and the other areas within 2 years period? I think that is not even addressed. Now, Solomon was talking about this concept of transitional justice as transient kind. I think the way the Westerners and politicians like Blinken are using the current transitional justice concept raises the question that Solomon raised, but I don't think the right answer was given. Transition to what? I think Blinken and the White House expect us to transition to a democratic Ethiopia. I don't think they are talking about, they're looking at reconciliation, addressing what ails Ethiopia, what's deep in the bones of what went Ethiopia for the last so many years. That is not the concern of the White House. The concern of the White House is to really rehabilitate the current political structure that you have in Addis Ababa, and B, to transition to what they call democratic governance. And it says that, the report says that, and transitional justice in the current concept says that. It doesn't address a lot of the issues and that we would have liked. I think the flow of this, Solomon touched several very, very key points as to what's wrong with this. I think we would like we need to begin with what went wrong with the very way this concept was set. Who really set this study? Who put together the framework? Did they go first for a visioning to talk to people, as he said, to the people who have been hurt? TPLF, OLF, ONLF, OLA, AGAW. The people who have been hurt are outside this platform. They have not been consulted. So later on, just like the election that we had in the past, they will be given a resolution that has been sold to AU and to the White House and the State Department, and people like TPLF and OLF and AGAW and Sidama and all those people who are outside the mainstream would be told, hey guys, this time even the US is with us, even the US Congress is with us, take it or leave it. And that, that would be probably what we will get out of this. I don't expect this thing to really address some of the ailing some of the causes that ail Ethiopia's political problems, whether it is from the imperial time of Haile Selassie through the Derg, because for Somalis, the most painful period is not covered. The most painful period for Somalis, if this temporal structure that they established, which is probably 1991. There's a little bit of beyond 1991 that Somalis have it, which is the blockade period that EPRDF created in the Ogaden. But I think the Derg era, which has, literally depleted that region to the tune of 1.5 million people, some of them like Palestinians never returned to their homes. The imperial era that really designated Somalis as foreigners in their own land, And I'm not talking all about Somalis. I mean, you talk to Oromos, the feudal structure and how that created a debasement and humiliation of the Oromo nation to a point where they changed their names, and the Oromo name was an insult to millions of Ethiopians. I mean, how do you just say that, we can move away, those are not important, or those are too difficult to deal? Well, transitional justice and reconciliation is supposed to be a difficult subject that takes you from where you are to a new horizon that you will never come back to, So this is an easy way out. I think the three urging goals that this thing will achieve is A, to make sure, as Solomon and Duke said, that the Western nations and the donors will wash their hands and say, we stabilize Ethiopia, is no longer in the Russian or the Chinese camp, and they are moving toward this good governance. That's number one. Number two, the current structure with some, modification on the edges and some fall guys here and there. We don't know who that fall guy would be. Would that be, Burhanu Tula? Would that be, Daniel Kibret? We don't know. But very, designated fall guys would here and there appear, and then the political structure would stay. And then crimes will never be accounted at the local level. Whether it is in the Sidama region, in the Somali region, in the Afar, in Tigray, none of those would be in the issue. And I think there will be a new era for people like Abiy if this thing works to just move on and probably buy time for the next phase of Ethiopia.
Thank you, Faisal, for that point. Duke, you can comment on the what has been said so far, and with that also, please share with us, with our viewers, your final thoughts for the day.
Yeah, I have to agree with everything that's been said. I mean, it sums it up pretty well. The United States, the role that they want to play in this has always been a little bit too much. To interfere with the National Dialogue Conference, to promote that, to getting involved in this transitional justice thing, to look at all of these things that are happening in Ethiopia and say, well, we're going to help out these very nuanced things. We're not even getting the very simple things right. We're not even getting food to starving people. First, learn to do that. Then go into the country and start telling them how to do justice and everything. What we have right now is something that's going to look good to the U.S. The reason why the consultants put it together like this is because it's basic best practices. If you ignore the fact that everything that's going on in Ethiopia and who's going to be controlling it, then it becomes an unworkable plan. But I'm waiting to hear what Blinken says when he's over in Ethiopia. I'm waiting to hear what the reaction is going to be, not only to this, but to everything else the Ethiopian government's done and not done since the signing of the Pretoria Agreement. And I hope that we are going to stand on the side of the people, but it hasn't happened yet. And I don't know if anybody would be shocked to see Blinken just start to nod his head along with the Ethiopian government with anything the regime is saying, because that's the argument that prevailed at the State Department. Because the idea of normalizing relations and everything like that looks a lot more attractive than actually standing with the people of Ethiopia. And if you do that, then you're waiting for the next thing to come. I mean, if we normalize relations with Ethiopia, how long is that going to be? For 6 months, for a year? I mean, when is something going to happen that's going to make us have to rethink that, like we're doing right now? And we're going to be back in this situation again after, God forbid, so many more people are hurt and killed. The United States can't save Ethiopia. The United States can't save the world, but we can react and respond in a way that's going to be helpful, not only for Ethiopia, but also for the United States. We shouldn't be bogged down in this back and forth, trying to figure out how to lean on them without offending the regime, and how to push for human rights without calling it human rights, because that upsets people. This is not something that we're doing very well at. We're trying to play China's game, and we're not doing it very well. We're losing ground, and we're not picking up ground by capitulating to regimes like the Prosperity Party. Thank you.
Thank you, Duke, for that. Saul, your final thoughts?
I think just to piggyback on that, the reality on the ground is defying what is cooking up in Addis. A friend once, I think a couple of years ago, when the war started, and the diplomats, particularly European and US diplomats, were literally almost cheering and smirking. I was so upset, and I was trying to understand why. And they look hunky-dory, going to events along with him and showing up in ceremonies. And reminded me when in 1991, PRDF was marching to Addis. There were a lot of diplomats within a month, that's May 1991, like in April and March, sending dispatches to their respective capitals that everything is hunky and dory, and the PRDF would not make it to Addis. So the international community and the diplomats in Addis are really living in a bubble. Whatever they are trying to gin up, cook up, may last their term, whether in Addis or the term of the Biden administration or whoever is in power in Europe. But this is just a time bomb. Today, as we speak today, the price of 1 quintal teff in Addis, a quintal teff in Addis, is 10,000 birr to 11,000 birr. Why? The Oremia decided to stop importing or allowing teff from Gojam or the Amhara state. For compensation of forcing farmers to sell wheat at about 3,200 birr or something like that. For whatever reason, from 1,000 birr, 6,000 to 7,000, overnight, it's now being 10,500 to compensate Oromia farmers. Big political crisis. As we speak, $1 today was 115 birr in the black market. 2 weeks ago, it was 100 birr. This is spiraling down. There is nothing they can do to save Abiy unless they really look into the serious security political problems, invite all entities, ONLF, OLA, TPLF, TDF, Salsawiyane, WUNAT, everybody, unless they can invite the stakeholders and look into the political crisis of the country, trying to save Abiy. What they are throwing is just literally pouring water on a rock.
Okay, thank you, Saul, for that. Faisal, your final thoughts?
Yes, I think a couple of things. Number one, the issue Solomon raised, I want to comment on this whole wheat issue and how the government is trying to control the farmers. It looks like Ethiopian economists forgot Gordon, what's his name, Beyond Ujama, the book called Beyond Ujama, where Tanzania and Nyerere tried to control the peasants and they literally withdrew from the market. When government entity tries to buy from the farmers and then sell the way they want, and even times sell back to the farmers at a higher price, they stop farming. Even you can kill them. I think we are on that road where, the government is trying to manipulate farmers to a point where they no longer see any benefit to farm wheat. And I invite Shimalis Abdissa and his team to, manipulate and control the peasants to an extent where they will just say no to farming wheat. That's one thing. I think with the transitional justice, and I really hope that more and more Ethiopians will reflect on this, is that this is not a program designed for an Ethiopian audience, designed by Ethiopians. I don't think the people who are designing this have in their hearts the millions of Ethiopians who have been suffering for the years. It's just a project to get over the hump so that they can move on. Other than that, people shouldn't take this thing as a big thing. Like many other projects that the government does, like the election was, which we watched what this result was, then this is similar to that. And then the third issue I like to mention is it's like singing to your own tone with your own audience. Who were the people who would have grudge against the Ethiopian government and institutions from the beginning? It's people like OLF. It's not people like Mustafa Omar, who was a director, who was a deputy minister during the EPRDF. And then after that, few years just went on sabbatical to work somewhere and come back and became a president. And I'm just mentioning him because the rest are the same. Those are not the people who suffered in the last so many years under the multiple systems that we have seen. Those people are not sitting around the table. They're not stakeholders. Somalis have invested in OLF and other groups who have been fighting for so many years, who have been so much humiliated and killed and massacred and tortured. And later on, they will be given as a gift a product that they have no idea where it came from. And that tells you that this is just another project, just the same way they criticized the Dergi's, transitional justice, which was limited in this report we referred. The EPRDF is a limited transitional justice, which was also limited. This one is also in the same generation as that, and it will just, come, sit there, not address the issues that have caused the Tigray war, the Somali war, the Sidama war, the Aga war, and after 5 years, we will find ourselves in the same hole. That time, just again competing to the audience of the State Department and Europeans, and we'll repeat that circle. I hope somebody would think that the process will come back to the Ethiopian masses in their different colors, no matter who they are, in their different colors. Unless you have that, this won't work. Thank you.
Thank you, Faisal. With that, we'll end today's show. But I just want to announce to remind our viewers, in addition to today's excellent H panel, we have covered this topic before at the H panel, and this morning as well, and this week. I spoke with two lawyers, Ethiopian lawyers. One is Mastawal Tarafa. We did this Ethiopia's transitional justice versus international and regional mechanisms of accountability and justice. That was on the 9th of March. And today, this morning, I did with another lawyer, Mogas Tashoma, Ethiopia, or accountability, where art thou? We asked that question, and we discussed that this morning. Tomorrow, for those who speak Tigrinya, we'll be doing another one in Tigrinya with Gabriel Hadush, who co-authored a paper this week questioning the TPLF's monopoly in Tigray. And he did also, he was a sole author of another paper on the same subject a year ago. So I will be speaking with Gabriel Hadush tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and tune into that. Gentlemen, I thank you for your time and for, as usual, for your insightful evening. Good night.
Thank
Good
you.
night and thank you.
You have been following us live on the channel, UMD Media's weekly show here online, and we'll be broadcasting this content to the Horn of Africa under Horn Broadcasting Services, HBS, under YSAT. Your host was Getachew Asafa. See you tomorrow. Good night.